Last month, our very own Ryan got to interview Richard Linklater at the South by Southwest red carpet for Linklater's new film, Apollo 10½: A Space-Age Childhood.
I saw that. Linklater's advice for student filmmakers to just go out there and make films with materials available was very inspiring.
Ryan was particularly inspired to revisit Linklater's debut cult classic shot here on the streets of Austin, 1990's Slacker.
Slacker was filmed here on the streets of Austin, particularly in the West Campus area, a neighborhood predominantly occupied by students attending the University of Texas like myself. It's really inspiring seeing a film made in such relatable circumstances, which got me wondering, what kind of resources did Linklater have access to when making Slacker? What kind of film community was there in Austin at that time? And how has the city changed both physically and culturally since the film's release? In order to get more information on the history of Austin's film scene, I went and met with Lars Nielsen, the lead programmer at the Austin Film Society, or AFS. Nielsen was also one of many who moved to Austin after seeing Slacker in its original theatrical run.
Austin had really had a film scene for years before. There was an organization called Cinema Texas that had existed on campus that was really unique and different because they were doing screenings, multiple screenings every week. And it was really world-class programming. It was programming that was globally aware of the trends going on at the time, not only of new films, but also of an understanding of how to contextualize older films. That's a big part of what attracted Richard Linklater to Austin, is Cinema Texas and what Cinema Texas was doing.
In the summer of 1989, production began on Slacker, a mosaic of counterculturalism and youth in Austin that utilizes a narrative technique where it moves from character to character and story to story, never focusing on anyone for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. In order to get more context on Slacker's production, I talked with Charles Ramirez-Berg, a professor of film studies at the University of Texas and a member of the Austin Film Society's board at its inception. He also got to be an extra in the film when he happened upon the production at a local half-price books.
And I realized there was a crew, a very small crew making a film. I thought, oh, it's probably some RTF students doing one of their projects or something. And then I looked, and it was Rick. And he's real modest. He said, yeah, I'm making this little film, and I've been shooting around town, and it was a big success in Austin. And then, it was a big success everywhere.
Slacker premiered at the Dolby Theater on July 27, 1990. And was acquired by Orion Pictures for a nationwide release that occurred almost a year later, on July 5, 1991. The film was a huge hit, grossing over 53 times its small $23,000 budget. It followed a wave of successful independent cinema prominent in the late 1980s and early 1990s, started by films like Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It and Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
The early 90s were not the beginning of indie cinema by any means, but it was sort of the beginning, in a way, of indie cinema as being seen as something that could put money in the bank for film distributors or film producers. It became apparent that one could credibly buy low, sell high among independent films and make a profit.
What made Austin, I think, a film city was Rick's next movie, Dazed and Confused. After the success of Slacker, he gets a chance to make for a studio. In those days, if Hollywood said, come, you went. And that was it, because that's where everything was. That's where all the talent is. That's where all the technology is. That's where all the equipment is, the studios, the money. That's where you go. And everybody's ambition is to make it to Hollywood, right? And once again, Rick goes the other way. They wanted him to make, come to Burbank and make your movie. And he said, no, I think we ought to make it here. That decision, I think, changed everything because it indicated and it proved that you don't have to go to Hollywood to do it.
Back then, this was a risky decision. Despite being the capital city of Texas and having a nationally recognized university, Austin still was considered by many to be a relatively small town. In 1989, when Slacker was filmed, Austin had a population of only around 546,000 people. Today, Austin has a population of over 2 million.
Austin was a college town. It wasn't a big city, it was a college town. If you went beyond Burnett Road and like 183, I mean, that was kind of it. Beyond that is country, and there's nothing. So now we're a big city, and people talk about it as a big city, and more things are happening in this big city. So Tesla, is here, Samsung is here, Amazon is here, all of that. And I think those of us who are old timers grow without losing your identity. I think that's the fear, that we'll get so big that you won't be able to tell the difference between Los Angeles and New York City and Austin. Okay, I'm hoping that never happens.
Even during Slacker's production, Austin was a city of contradictions. In the opening frames of the film, we see the transition from rural to urban, and throughout the course of the narrative, we're constantly confronted with the city defined by its rural roots, but growing into something much larger. The city exists within an infamously conservative state, but the politics of its characters in comparison are quite progressive. The film's characters warn others about the dangers of imminent global warming, argue against anti-democratic voting restrictions, and vehemently protest working for a paycheck rather than passion. As Austin continues to grow, the contradictions only become more extreme, and some mourn the loss of the city they once knew.
People often sort of say, well, the Austin of 1990 isn't there anymore, it's gone away, that it's over.
When asked about whether or not he agrees with those thoughts, Nielsen said this.
There's a certain kind of Austin that you only really see and perceive when you're young. You can no longer hear those frequencies at a certain time. I do think that if a film like Slacker today was made, it would just be more noise, probably. It would be hard for it to jump the fence into commercial cinema.
Austin has a unique culture that's hard to replicate in larger cities and hard to miss when you're within the city limits. That's part of Slacker's success. Linklater's not an outsider coming into Austin and making a film about its people. He's making a love letter to his city with his friends. The film is expertly and carefully crafted, but its easygoing tone, which reflects the passive attitudes of its characters, make the film seem achievable to any aspiring filmmaker.
Austin does have a streak of, we might say, counterculturalism that has always attracted from other cities, particularly in Texas, the oddballs, the weirdos. And I think that in many ways, Slacker is a poem about that particular kind of energy. Not even necessarily those people, but that kind of energy that exists in Austin.
Considering how much the Austin film scene has grown since its release, it's hard not to see Slacker's impact on the community. Whether large productions are filming in Austin studios, or small student sets are filming on the streets of Austin, there's a creative spark that is embodied in Slacker and still continues today. As the Austin film industry continues to grow, the city will continue to fight to hold on to what makes it unique, even in the face of gentrification, industrialization, and rapid expansion. For Sneak Peek, I'm Ryan Schwen.